Good afternoon, ladies. I just wanted to take a few moments just to share with you a brief encouragement. As I'm recording this, my favorite hymn's playing in the background, Great is Thy Faithfulness. How timely is that, and how kind of God. And it is God's faithfulness that I've had to time and time again remind myself of in the midst of all the events for the last several months. I've battled fear and worry, and I think that's been magnified because of my job as a nurse and the amount of information that I'm fed from my employer. The times we've reconfigured our unit so that we could care for potential COVID patients, and just the fear and anxiety that's expressed by my colleagues. It's really fed my anxiety and my fear, and I've really had to wrestle and take those fears and anxieties to the Lord and remind myself of His faithfulness. In the midst of all this, I had a daughter who needed surgery when Governor Hogan shut down elective surgeries, and I didn't know whether her surgery would be considered elective, and just had to pray and trust God that He was in the midst of all that. And thankfully she was able to have her surgery and everything went well. And the only downside is I wasn't able to be with her like I have been all those many times in the past. But her husband was with her, and he took great care of her, and it was wonderful to see them operate in that capacity. And I've had children lose jobs and yet see God provide for them within weeks another job. And one of those daughters is a nurse, and she moved cross country because of that job. And I had to battle fear with her traveling cross country and make sure you do this and telling her all these things. And just rather than trying to control it all, I had to go to the Lord and just cry out to Him. And as Tumbo and Leanne the last 2 weeks have read from Psalm 46, and Psalms are full of great encouragement. The psalmists pour their hearts out to God, but that's not where they end. They don't end with their lament or their pouring out of their hearts. Then they take their soul to task and remind themselves of what they know to be true about God. And that's what I've had to do. And some of those verses, Psalm 46 is one I go to, but my absolute favorite is in Psalm 94. And it says, starting in verse 17, "If the Lord had not been my help, my soul would have lived in the land of silence. When I thought my foot slips, your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up. When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul." And then in verse 22, it goes on to say, "The Lord has become my stronghold, and my God, the rock of my refuge." So I just rest in the Lord and remind myself. I think my biggest surprise is how cyclical this battle has been for me. Usually I can press through and move on, and it seems like I'll just, out of the blue, I'll wake up one day and my heart is just overwhelmed for no apparent reason. And I just have to, again, take my soul to task and remind myself how faithful God is and how sovereign He is, and that He is moving. And how timely that we're in 1 Peter, because what does Peter tell us in 1 Peter 5? To cast all our cares on Him. And, one of my favorite preachers is Charles Swindoll, and early in the pandemic, he was going through the book of Job. And it just was such an encouragement to remember and be reminded of how Job stood fast in his faith and trust in the Lord. So no matter what you're dealing with right now, I just pray that whether it's unemployment, or you're looking at the summer and canceled vacation plans, or you're looking at the uneasiness and the difficulties that our nation is walking through, or you're worried about a second wave of the pandemic, just remind yourself. I always told my kids as we were going through major trials as a family, tell God what you're thinking. Tell Him that you think it stinks. Tell Him you think it's hard. But don't stop there. Continue and press in and remind yourself what you know to be true about God. And that's what the psalmists do, and that's what I encourage you to do. I just say that I love each and every one of you, and I miss seeing you and worshiping together and fellowshipping together. I just pray that you would find yourself in a place where you're if you're struggling, that you just cry out to God. You pour your heart out to Him and let His consolations cheer your soul.